Hi guys, I welcome you all to the next lecture in our anthropology series. So we had already started the topic language, culture and communication. Yesterday we had developed a relationship between language and culture and how these three terms are very interrelated to each other. So today we are going to do that only. Today we are going to do the nature of language and how the language, you can say, so to say, originated, right? So these two things we are going to do. One more lecture we'll take on the this chapter only tomorrow, and we'll complete this chapter, right? So let's start with it. Okay, so nature of language, वैसे तो this part I have covered it yesterday but didn't summarize it, so I've just written it here. If you have to talk about the nature of language, you can talk about it in three aspects, that is the structural view, the communicative or functional view, and the interactional view. So basically अभी तक you must have understood कि structural view और functional view क्या होता है. ठीक है, there is not much of a thing to be understood there, but even then I'll tell you. In structural view, what happens, we focus more on the structural aspect of the language. For example, there are phones, phonemes, right? Then like words, okay, words. Then words are arranged into sentences with the help of grammar. Okay, we make meaningful sentences, right? Those sentences make paragraphs and all of that. That is how the language is structured. For example, I say my name is Aprajita. So Aprajita, right? So if I say this, okay, so there is a structuring that has happened. Everybody who wants to address somebody, telling them their name, they have to address it in the same way, right? ऐसा नहीं हो सकता कि मैं you say my name is for example राम एंड मैं बोलूँ अपराजिता इज माई नेम, ऐसे नहीं होता ना. दैट इज रॉन्ग स्ट्रक्चरिंग. राइट स्ट्रक्चरिंग इज ऑलवेज माई नेम इज अपराजिता, राइट? सो व्हाट इज दैट? ग्रामर से पता चला, राइट? व्हेन टू यूज द फ्रेज, व्हेन टू यूज कॉमा, व्हेन टू यूज फुल स्टॉप, ये सब क्या है? दीज आर ऑल स्ट्रक्चरल एस्पेक्ट्स ऑफ लैंग्वेज. सो लैंग्वेज स्ट्रक्चरल पार्ट में ही आता है और ये लिंग्विस्टिक्स का पार्ट है. दिस इज द पार्ट ऑफ लिंग्विस्टिक्स. सो दिस इज द फर्स्ट काइंड ऑफ थिंग. Second is communicative or functional view. Now functional view कहता है कि what is the function or what is the need of the language. Language क्यों चाहिए? Language चाहिए because we need to maintain a society. ठीक है? We need to carry on the functions of the culture. ठीक है? And for that we need to talk to each other, right? We need to talk to each other. So that comes in the socio-linguistics. Sociolinguistic क्या हो गया? Social plus linguistic, right? So studying different languages, studying their cultures through it. ठीक है, जैसे हमने कल भी बात की थी, a lot of the culture is embedded in the language itself. So studying that, the functional view, how language is interextricably related to culture, that will come in the communication or functional view. This we had covered very deeply yesterday, right? So I will not repeat it here. And the interactional view also we talked about it yesterday. Interactional view में क्या होता है? Me as a human being, I as a human being, if I have to talk to you, I need to interact to you, I need to have a common language, right? कुछ, there should be a common basis for me to interact with you, right? So to interact, to make interpersonal relationships, right? To make interpersonal relationships, to carry out the business transactions, to carry out my day-to-day activities, I need to interact, create interpersonal relationships, and that is the part of interactional viewpoint, or the third part which we were studying. So this we had done yesterday. I have just given you an overview. Anybody who has not watched the yesterday's video, I have covered it in very detail, so you please go back and watch, because if the question from this chapter is going to come, ऐसे ही deeper aspects पे आएगा. For example कि how culture and language are related. Simply क्या होता है, what is what is the features of language, ऐसा कुछ they are not going to ask us, right? So yesterday's lecture was important. Go back and watch that. So now we start the origin. नाउ हाउ लैंग्वेज केम, ठीक है, लैंग्वेज आई कैसे, हाउ लैंग्वेज केम इन टू बींग. हमें पता है कि यू नो फॉर प्रोपोगेशन ऑफ, for transmission of, for continuation of culture, language is a must, and language is a very important integral part of the, it's a sine qua non to the culture. But now how language evolved is a you can say it's a debate that has been going on since a long time, and up till today no conclusive theory has come up which you can say ki okay, this is the theory which you can believe fully that this is how the language must have originated. So अभी तक it's a ongoing debate, कोई conclusive evidence नहीं है किसी भी theory पे. Every theory is partially right, partially wrong. So let's look at it. So everything, you know, अगर if you go back to anything and trace the history of theories ना, एक divine creation theory तो आपको हमेशा मिलेगी, because there was a time जिसको हम बोलते हैं dark age of science और dark age जिसको बोलते हैं, when people did not used to reason, did not used to rationally think, and everything according to them was created by God. So everything was created by God. So in divine theory that was only believed कि language is a gift from the God to us. ठीक है, मतलब as much as this theory I don't feel कि ये कुछ मतलब it makes sense, right? So obviously everything अगर हम देखें तो इस logic से तो everything is a creation of God, but that's not something which we can believe in today's day and age, right? So divine creation theory बोलती है in the Genesis 2:20 it was believed that it's a gift of God to us, right? So divine creation theory ये कहती है. Then natural evolution theory. Natural evolution क्या होता है? For example, how man naturally evolved from being ape to Homo sapien sapien, right? Man has had its own journey. So natural evolution hypothesis also says that in the course of evolution of man, when man was evolving, even the language was originated somewhere. So in natural evolution, this was believed that during the course of evolution, when our when from ape to Homo sapien sapien, the journey, are so many anatomical changes happened in our body, right? There were mental changes, ठीक है, mentally क्या change हुआ, ठीक है, जैसे the hands were less free before when we were apes because quadrupedalism was there and hands were used to move. But when man started to walk bipedal, the hands were free to make tools, to do all of that. उससे हमारी mental abilities पे फ़र्क पड़ा, our mental abilities started to grow. So like that only in the course of evolution there came a time when language also came in. So natural evolution theory ये बोलती है, right? So then third comes the imitation hypothesis. Now next theory is imitation hypothesis. इसमें बोलती है natural evolution का ही सब part है ये कि why language came, because we saw animals, ठीक है, we started to imitate them or certain events and we started to imitate those events. Imitate क्या होता है? To act like somebody. If I'm talking, somebody wants to if somebody starts talking like me, that means he or she is imitating me. So imitation से the language must have come in. For example, इसमें पहला है ding dong hypothesis. In ding dong hypothesis they say that first languages must have originated from onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia is, for example, there is an explosion. So what kind of a sound is generally we associate with explosion? It's like boom, right? It's boom. So we say boom is explosion के साथ it is related. So first sounds or first words that man must have spelled out from its mouth were the words which were related to these natural events. Like for example dhak dhak. Dhak dhak is like heartbeat, right? So if man has to say heartbeat, they will say dhak dhak, right? In Indian it's also जब भी a gun is shot, it's dish kyaun. So these kind of sounds must have been the first ones, the first words that man must have spelt out from its mouth. So imitation में पहला हो गया ding dong hypothesis, जो natural events से related है कि natural events, natural phenomena से जो from the natural phenomena the sounds which might have been created by humans. Second says poo poo hypothesis. This says the first words were not these, but they were the involuntary exclamations. Now what is involuntary exclamations? Something which naturally happens. For example, anger, right? Anger, disgust, ठीक है? Then feelings of hunger, ठीक है? Feelings of happiness. So these are certain emotions that are involuntary to you. If you feel angry, you can't control it and it will show on your face. So in the poo poo hypothesis, it was believed that the first words must have originated from these feelings or these involuntary exclamations. ठीक है? The third is bow bow hypothesis. Now bow bow, you know, bow bow is a dog barking, right? So इससे आप याद रख सकते हो कि this hypothesis says that man must have looked at other animals who were making these sounds and they must have tried to imitate these animals. So they must have started to say bow bow or meow, because meow is said by cat, right? So man must have tried to imitate the animals, right? So basically इसमें imitation hypothesis में हो क्या रहा है? We are trying to associate man's first words or how the language must have originated to certain things. For example, in the ding dong hypothesis, it was the natural events, right? The second was the poo poo hypothesis, in which it was talking about the involuntary exclamations. The third is bow bow hypothesis, which says that man must have started to imitate the sounds made by the animals, right? So this is how the words must have come in. Tata hypothesis says it must have been a gestural hypothesis. जैसे for example, man कुछ अपने hand से तो movements करते होंगे. When the language must have not come in, ठीक है, but even then man was communicating to each other, na? So they must have been doing certain gestures from their eyes, from their lips, from their hands, right? So when we say tata, tata is what? We also wave our hand, right? We wave our hand. So that means we are saying tata, right? So gestural hypothesis says these gestures must have come in, and for these gestures the words must have been created. So in the imitating hypothesis, these four are the things. ठीक है? ये कहते कि the first words, because क्या है, language at once नहीं आ जाएगी ना. It's not like today the man is not speaking and tomorrow a full-fledged language is developed by man. ऐसे नहीं होता है, right? It has to be a very slow, a very gradual process. So it could be true that the early man must be talking in only certain words to each other. Maybe it's possible that they did not have elaborate language, elaborate grammar, elaborate because as we believe that text भी बहुत बाद में आया है, so rules of language भी must have originated very late. So in very early times, how were they talking to each other? Maybe it was only words, maybe it was only sounds, right? So imitation hypothesis यही बोल रहा है कि maybe these words were imitations of certain events, certain things that they saw around them and must have created certain words, because ऐसा नहीं होगा कि a full-fledged language will come in the first place only. It has to gradually evolve. So they were talking about this कि ऐसे ऐसे evolve हुआ होगा, right? The next comes necessity hypothesis. ठीक है? So पहला था अभी इससे पहले हमने divine creation पढ़ लिया. That means language was a gift of God. इन्होंने तो मतलब पूरा logic ही ख़त्म कर दिया कि okay, it's a gift of God, ख़त्म, logic ख़त्म, भगवान ने हमको दे दिया है, बस हमको लैंग्वेज मिल गई है, बस. ठीक है? नेचुरल एवोल्यूशन बोलता है कि इन द वे ऑफ एवोल्यूशन, जैसे मैन इवॉल्व हुआ फ्रॉम लेस कॉम्प्लेक्स टू मोर कॉम्प्लेक्स स्पीशीज, वैसे ही when the complexity started to increase, the language must have evolved in that course of evolution. Imitation hypothesis we have seen, ding dong, poo poo, bow bow, Tata hypothesis we have seen. So now necessity hypothesis from the name itself believes कि as and when the need for language must have been created, then the language must have been originated. So necessity में सबसे पहला it's warning hypothesis, मतलब कि you know that man was living in a very stressful situation, right? Because it was living with animals that were way bigger and colossal and powerful than man, right? But even in that situation, even in the struggle for existence, man pushed himself up to the ladder and became the apex predator just because it was intelligent. And intelligence, the intelligence of man was, you can attribute man's intelligence to two things. One is culture and one is language. So these two things are so unique to human that they made the man so powerful that it could, jump up the ladder and in apex predator से भी ऊपर पहुंचा दिया. So warning hypothesis must believes that when the man was living in this forest, when there was so many big predators who could eat man, so a cooperative behavior was required, right? Cooperation was required, because if you have to hunt down a tiger also, it cannot be done by a man, right? So man needed to cooperate with each other, and then they must have created the words like look, run, alert, help. So these could be the first words that must have come in, because if you have to strategize, you need to have certain words. Okay, I'll just say run and you have to start running. Okay, I'll say help, you have to come to me. Okay, I would say gather and you have to gather around. So warning hypothesis believes that the words which were first needed, they must have come in, like look, run, alert, like these words, warning के लिए, to strategize, to cooperate in hunting down the animals. Next, in necessity hypothesis only, these are all part of necessity hypothesis. First we have done warning hypothesis, right? Necessity में पहला हो गया warning hypothesis. Second is yo hi ho hypothesis. Now it says because man needed to cooperate, so cooperative behavior required man to communicate with each other, and then the words must have originated. Warning hypothesis में क्या था कि warning वाले words पहले आए होंगे, alert, help, look, run. But cooperative effort क्या बोलता है कि cooperation, the words related to cooperation, and because man needed to be in a group, it needed to cooperate. Because of that, those words must have come in, or because of that words must have come in. Line hypothesis says that with our gestures we can actually emote a lot of things. ठीक है, language is not needed like that. ठीक है, language is needed to lie, because our so called involuntary exclamations show a lot about us. It can show the disgust on our face, the happiness, the sadness, the every kind of emotion that we have. We do not need to put or express them into words. They can already be expressed through our gestures, our facial expressions. Because man wanted to lie, because it had become so intelligent, it had that ability to lie, the words or the language must have been originated. ठीक है. Then the fourth one comes in ritual speech co-evolution. Now ritual speech co-evolution क्या बोलता है? It says that ritual मतलब religion or culture, it signifies the larger word culture only, and speech signifies language. They must have co-evolved. मतलब कि it was not, there were no landmarks like कि now culture has evolved, now language will evolve. ऐसा नहीं हुआ होगा. They must have been co-evolved according to the need and necessities. So they must have evolved around the similar times. ठीक है ना? Because they are so inextricably related to each other that one cannot be separated from the other. So they must have evolved somewhere around the same time. and because they need each other, both language and culture need each other, so that is why they must have evolved around the same time. So necessity में समझ आ गया, because language needed culture, culture needed language, so that is why they must have evolved together. Lying hypothesis क्या है? The need to lie maybe created the language. Cooperative behavior में क्या था? The need to cooperate made man to create a language. So ये थे हमारे necessity में. Then comes acquisition of language by children. Now these two theories, acquisition of language by children and Creole language, ये दोनों थोड़े से similar है. They are similar a little bit. I'll tell you how. These two theories basically say, पहली करते हैं acquisition of language by children. So उसमें क्या होता है? What is that? Basically, it says that how a language is picked up by a child. Child picks up language in a very gradual process. Gradually, I don't know what has happened to this. Sometimes the screen is not clear, so that is why the pen doesn't work very properly. Yeah, so gradual. It's a very gradual process. For example, a baby first would only cry, make sounds, right? So nothing like that. It's only sounds. But there'll come a time when it'll soon start to say monosyllabic words, right? Like ma, pa. These are very monosyllabic words, right? So it'll gradually from sounds, it will come to such words. Then it will start to say double syllabic words like mama, papa, right? So it will start to say such words. Then it will start to create 2 or 3 word sentences. Gradually more word sentences without any grammar, and then after certain time when they get to the age of 7, 8 maybe, then they start to make meaningful sentences with grammar. So ऐसे करते करते language evolves in a very very long time. मतलब it takes like 8 to 10 years for a child to speak properly, right? So they believe, this theory believes that language must have originated like this, कि सबसे पहले early man must be talking to each other through maybe sounds, simple words. Then in the course of time maybe more words like complex words must have evolved. Then they must have started to speak in 2-3 word sentences without any grammar. After certain time in the course of evolution, ठीक है, they must have created a language, a full structure, right? Grammar of language, ठीक है. फिर when once the text came in language को और sophisticate किया गया होगा, right? So this is how this theory believes that language must have been picked up by early humans the same way how the child picks up a language. The Creole hypothesis believes in this believes something similar only, that the African Asians they did not have any language, so they did not speak. Okay, so it was when we came into the contact of the colonials or the other people who came from the west and all, ठीक है, after watching them they must have learnt how to speak, so they must have also picked up the language, like first certain words, then making sentences without any language, and then after putting some grammar and then making some meaningful sentences. So Creole says कि man को African Asians they didn't have a language, but when they came into contact with the Westerners they started to pick up language like a child picks up. वैसे ही similarly they must have also picked up the language. So this was another hypothesis. Okay, so उसके बाद आ गया theory by physical anthropology. Now this is the last that I've put in, because paper में if origin of language comes in, max to max this question is going to come in 20 marker, right? So you can see we have put so many theories, these many are enough for you to learn also and write it also in the examination. More are not required. So in physical anthropology, physical anthropology is basically biological anthropology also. They tried to very scientifically try to define ki when language must have evolved. So they said that in the fossils, or in the abhi, in us, Homo sapiens sapien, we have two very important areas in our brain. One is the Broca's and one is the Wernicke's. Okay, so the Broca's area is very required for speech. So if we have to make any sound, or if we have to say words, we need to have this area, because this controls our speech, and Wernicke's control articulation. That means, for example, articulation क्या होती है? If you are able to clearly say the words, right, and you do not stammer, you do not have आप वो words को गलत नहीं बोलते हो, articulate होने के लिए Wernicke's region is required. So they started to see in our fossils whether they had these Broca's and the Wernicke's area. So they saw in very early skulls, they did not find the Broca's and the Wernicke. This is basically the temporal part of the brain. ठीक है, temporal part of the brain में you will find these Broca's and Wernicke. So what they saw, they did not, the Broca's and Wernicke's was not present in them. But gradually in the course of evolution, there came a time when they started to see Broca's and Wernicke's. Sometimes it was not that much evolved, sometimes only one part was there, right? So what they saw, उन्होंने by the help of this, they conclusively said that okay, when Wernicke's and Broca must have come in, that was the time precisely when man must have started to speak. Okay, so this is through biology that they tried to explain language इस टाइम पर आई होगी. But now if you have आपने if you have must realized by now that अभी तक कुछ भी conclusive, there is no conclusive evidence कि language कैसे originate हुआ. Because if we take the biological theory also, no doubt उन्होंने conclusively ये तो बताया, they tried to tell us that okay, Wernicke's and Broca is important, and in the course of evolution, when the man got this Wernicke's and Broca together, they must have started to speak. But the problem is, they must have got this thing, but when they started to use is not clear with their theory, and so is the problem with other theories. For example, for example, जो हमने ये imitation hypothesis पढ़े, ठीक है, इसमें somebody is saying कि कुछ words like boom, dhak dhak, these were the first words. Then poo-poo hypothesis says due to anger, hunger, disgust, these were the first words. Bao says must have started to imitate the animal voices. But again, these are very small part of a language. They do not comprise, or you can't say it a language, because they are a very small part of language. Language is much bigger and complex structure than just a few words, right? So इनका theory में ये problem है. Divine hypothesis में तो बहुत सारा problem है. It's not at all scientific. Then necessity hypothesis is also having its own problems, because again they are restricting themselves to just a part of the language. But you can say acquisition of language by children and Creole do give us certain logical explanation of how the language must have been evolved. And of course the Wernicke's and Broca's, because that is important, so even their theory is a little bit scientific, but no theory is complete in its own to explain that how the language must have evolved, how man must have started to speak, and all of that. Okay, so today we are going to restrict ourselves to this much only. We'll take another lecture tomorrow and we'll try and finish this chapter. Okay, thank you so much. If you guys liked it, please like, share and subscribe, guys. Thank you.